a lot of buildup for a guy that didn't write a sermon today. But anyway, I think you guys know I don't write them very often. Well, I haven't written them for about a year. I don't write down much because I'm kind of relying on Holy Spirit to kind of just say, okay, here's where we go. So this is what I have written down. Unless you receive the kingdom as a child, you will not enter. The kingdom of heaven suffers violence, and the violent take it by force. So, two different scenarios and ways to the kingdom of heaven. And we've been fasting, and we've been, and when I say we, I'm using, I'll get to why we doesn't exactly apply all over the place, but um, we've been expecting. But every single one of us out here is an image bearer of God, but we all still look and behave differently, and He deals with us completely differently. You all have your own personal relationship with God, and you've had it whether you knew it or not from the very day you were conceived. And He's dealing with you differently than He deals with me, Heather, anyone. Yet He's the same God that can do something while we're here united as one. He can do one magnanimous thing as well. That's our God. So on Sunday the 5th is when we started fasting, if I'm not mistaken. We started fasting that evening. I started the fast and I was doing pretty well. I've done really well on fasts and I've done horribly on fasts. The first day can be the hardest, and then you kind of get into the middle. And then by the time you get to the last day, you've got this guy sending you pictures of pizza. So you can kind of struggle every once in a while once people get hungry and they sit there, ooh, boy, I'm going to eat 3 of those when I'm off this fast. And when I was here every day and we would fast, he and I would make each other struggle on purpose, of course. Like, you know what I miss? Sandwiches. I just miss a sandwich. And you sit there like, huh? Yeah. When was the last time? I think my teeth are actually getting soft. I need to sharpen them up. Really funny, silly stuff. But honestly, we all still went through this fast differently. And I'm going to tell you my fast. Monday, started. I actually woke up Monday thinking, okay, now it starts. Now it starts this morning. So I didn't eat anything. Then I went home and I was like, it doesn't start till this evening. So I ate a taco. But if I make a taco, it's never mind. Anyway, then I'm fasting and I'm fasting and I'm praying for directions, and I get my directions in my heart. I know God is saying, look, I want you to pray for your father, and I want you to really start interceding for him. And I poured myself out more than I pour myself out normally, because when you kind of feel God telling you, you just go do it. So there were 3 times Monday that God just absolutely interrupted me and said, get upstairs, get on your knees, pray for your dad. And I did. Hard prayers, not the same little prayers that I would pray where it's like, God be with my dad, how about you, whatever. No, I prayed rough prayers, crying, guttural prayers. And then I decided I'm going to call him. I'm going to call my dad. So I called him, no answer. I call him, no answer. 3 times I call him, no answer. Then I get a phone call from my dad's phone. And it's someone there with my dad to tell me that he's passed away. And I promised myself I wouldn't be too emotional. It's only been 3 weeks ago tomorrow. In that moment, I didn't understand, like, okay, I was praying for him. And I kept thinking, why did he die? I was praying for him. Why did this happen? Because I was praying for his health. I was praying for God to intercede in the situation that somehow spiritually I knew he had gotten himself into. I knew what was going on in his life. But every time I had spoke to him, he had said, no, I'm getting better every day. And I was just completely baffled for, well, weeks, really. You had me interceding for him. I know you did, but he still passed. Why would, And to be honest, my prayers, a lot of it was in tongues because I wanted to, you know how you don't want to pray what, what, you want to pray what God wants you to pray. So you just lay it out in tongues. Well, I had done that multiple times. And within all of that process, of course, you start the grieving process. So I started the grieving process and I started kind of getting a little bit angry. Who here's been through the grieving process enough to understand the anger that comes with grief? Yeah. The questioning that happens when you're in that point. And I was saying, God, you had me praying. I gave the fast to this. This was what I was, if I had to do it every day, every 21 days, my dad might have been the focal point because he had almost died a month ago and his life was saved. And I thought, okay, this is an opportunity right here. I'm going to fast. God's already called me to pray for him. So on that Monday, I was like, yep, yep, this is going to be what touches my dad. And he's gone. And so I got mad. And I've been mad at God before. Who here's been mad at God? A little bit. I've been mad at him before, not in a mad like, oh, if I could see you, I'd punch your face. I know better than that. I mean, I'm not going to threaten God, but I was upset. I was hurt because when I fast and pray and I put things out in a way that I'm thinking, yep, yep, this is God's plan. This is God's plan. And then he doesn't do what I said to do. Sometimes I get upset with him as if I'm calling the shots, as if, I mean, I did respond to him, but I thought, okay, I'm going to pray my words and you're going to make them happen. How many of you have ever been there? Like, I'm going to pray the words that are in my heart and I'm going to pray into this scenario the exact thing I want to happen. Didn't happen. So, as I was pushing into grief, still sitting right in the middle of grief, obviously, I started listening instead of talking, which is always a smart thing to do. And by the way, that day, that Monday night, also God said, you do not have to grieve and fast. I don't want you to grieve and fast. So my fast was one day. Not to say that I started going to buffets or, eating a whole pizza. There was nobody to eat one with because Neil wasn't eating. But anyway, that kind of ended it right there. That was the fast for me. That was it. And that one day was harder than a 21-day fast. But I still didn't understand what had happened exactly. And so this anger and this everything that was building up inside of me, I started to seek because if I'm going to go through something, I want to grow from it. If I'm going to go through grief, I want to grow from it. If I don't actually start moving forward with it, and so I checked out the process of grieving. I wasn't going to just sit there and think, well, you'll get over this. I said, what's the process? Disbelief, anger, questioning, all those things come into your heart. And you have to then purpose yourself into taking those things and saying, okay, God, I'm going to go through all this because you created grief. He had to have. It's a part of us, and we can grieve him. Therefore, he created grief. So we have to go through it. And this is the worst grief I've ever gone through, as anybody could possibly know. The first close death in your life is going to be hard. And so I'm going through grief and I'm questioning God. And he just keeps, God just, of course, this is also something that happens. You start trying to remember back all the different times you spent with this person that you just lost that was very close to you, that you love. You start calling back on memories over and over and over and over again. And so a little bit about my dad and I's relationship. It wasn't great. It was estranged. It had been estranged for years. He didn't live in this country. And, he had been raised by the silent generation. So he was a quiet man. I heard my dad tell me he loved me one time, and it was after his dad died. And for years, I wondered, why doesn't he say it? And why could he say it then? And what was the thing that propelled that in him? And what stops him from saying it? What stops him? And and so God is showing me, he showed for some reason, I'm seeing my grandmother's funeral, and then I'm just kind of playing all forward to the month or so that had passed since my dad had wound up sick and in the hospital. And it was this just these certain little clips and these words that would come to mind. um at the time he went in, I'd called him, and the very first time we talked on the phone and hung up, my dad said, "Goodbye, I love you." I had that every single day for a month. My dad's last words he spoke to me were, "I love you." And so, to put it in perspective, as much as I think God took him and God was working on me, God healed me through his death through this whole time period, because more than anything, I want to know, Dad, would you just say I love you? Would you say it first? Could you do that? And he did it every single time I spoke to him for a month. God gave me that. And he gave me the understanding he was going to go. I was calling him home. I could have done it in a split second, or I could have made sure I healed your relationship first. So I got this healing during this fast immediately, day one. It took me a little while to recognize what had happened. And it took a while for my heart to say, hey, this stuff was for you. Your dad laid in bed and you called him. I had him pinned down and cornered for a month so that you could talk to him anytime you wanted. And every time you got off the phone, he would tell you, I love you. Because it's time to move on from the hurt. So it brings to my mind exactly, you know, all these things that I've been clamoring for in my life. We all want the love of our Father. And when we know that our Father is in heaven and it's God the Father, we know he loves us no matter what. But it doesn't stop you from needing that attachment to the man that brought you into this world here on earth. And you kind of feel orphan-like if you don't have it. And you walk around kind of trying to fill holes with other things. And that moment when I realized, okay, you got that. You don't have to look for it anywhere else anymore. You have it with God, and you got it from your dad. So you can let that go. You're better. And I am so much better in that way. Now, it still hurts like crazy to lose somebody. But when you realize what God was giving you during this process, and you realize what he's trying to do for you through this grief, you understand it's all about healing no matter what. So the miracle, every single person in this room has seen a miracle happen in their lives. There's none of us that haven't had a miracle. I will never forget the day that I was so wound up and upset. I was living in the world. I wasn't doing well at all. My relationships weren't right. I was sinning. You guys know the story. I won't tell the whole story, but I remember the day I called out to God. And I remember he met me just that quick. The real day I was saved. Not the day I said the prayer when I was a kid. Not the day I raised my hand in church even. That hadn't saved me. That had aligned me with the church and with Christ. But I wasn't saved from anything because I was still in all of it. And how many know if you're still choosing it, you're not safe from it? You are not safe from it if you're still selecting it. You know, you can't be free of the demons that you like to play with. So at that point in time, I had cried out to God, and he literally came and got me. Some of you know, I was ripped out of myself, taken up into heaven. And I don't know how long I was there, but I know this. Every single thing that was hurting or had pain inside of me, and I'm talking about emotional pain, at that point in time, it was gone. It was kind of a pain to go back to the body and realize, oh, I'm still going to have to fight with all this stuff. But it was gone. And at that point, I felt God's love deeper than I've ever felt it before. There's not a person in this room that won't have that happen or hasn't already had that happen, one way or another. So we've all experienced a miracle. Because if your salvation isn't a miracle, then Christ on the cross and raising from the dead was nothing. Because that's for you. That's the miracle. So when we come now seeking miracles, we come with a lot of baggage and we come with a lot of Christianese, and we come thinking, well, we can do it this way. Every time I've fasted and prayed, Bob, whatever we've done. But there's so many different things that God's trying to show you of how he's already worked this miracle in your life. Or you're begging for something and he's trying to say, look, if I give you that right now, you're not ready for it. If I heal you of this right now before I heal your heart, before I take away the real pain and the pain that's stopping you from being able to worship me, or the pain that's keeping you away from me, or the pain that's hurting your relationships, if I do that, if I take away physical pain before emotional pain, will it mean the same? Would it mean the same thing to you? Because we have to be prepared when God moves on us. We have to be ready for anointing. We can't just say, God, heal everyone in this room and we'll all worship you to the day we die. You can't. It won't happen. I've been in that position where God moved in my life and I was good for a season and it made me strong for a season. But then the world came in, because how many knows it's coming? And the design is set to make you forget about the move of the Spirit. The design of the world is set to rob you of all the things that have already been done for you, to rob you of the things that you know are true in your life. And as the world distracts you, that healing from arthritis, from, it could get, I know people that have been healed from a lot of things. It's not going to keep you out of the world. But a transformation of your spirit from the ground up, everything about you is going to get changed if you want it to. That's healing your broken, dirty, sad, angry, lustful soul. And if that doesn't get healed before your physical body gets healed, you probably won't have the same reaction to what God's trying to do in your life. But I'm not saying definitely, because we all know God will do whatever he wants to do. When he chooses your soul, your spirit over your body, it's because it's the most important thing there is to him. It's more valuable to him than a pain you may be feeling or something you're suffering with for a season. And we're all going to suffer with something for a season. If you aren't, you'll still turn 50 someday, and no matter what, you're going to have aches and pains. And I turned 50 in Ohio, where it's much colder than Oregon, and sometimes Ohio hurts the body. But anyway, I was trying to figure out, God, I've had so many different things that I've prayed about physically. And to be perfectly honest, 90% of it still exists in my body. But my objective, my point of view, the way I work with it and the way I live my life are completely different than they were. I still get headaches. That doesn't mean you shouldn't pray that you don't get headaches. I still have a bad thyroid. Does not mean you shouldn't pray that God heals any of these things. But it does mean that he's given you grace and he's given you peace. And he's called you to walk your Christian walk with the strength of somebody that doesn't have any problems, with the mindset of somebody that knows they're already healed, with the ability to speak to other people and tell them, hey, you're gonna be healed, and watch this, we're gonna pray for you right now. Because there's some of you sitting in here that you've given up on being prayed for, probably. You've given up on, well, hands are going to be laid on me. The same thing's going to happen that happened last time hands were laid on me. As a matter of fact, I was sitting with Brenda back there last time we were in church together, and I think it was Randy. Randy called out for people with headaches up here. And she just get up there. He called for headaches. And I said, I went up there last week for headaches. How many times do I got to get in line? That's how I felt right then and there. It's like, nah, I'm kind of tired of getting prayed for those headaches. I'm going to live my life like they're gone. And I don't care if Randy prays for me for headaches. I honestly believe there's anointings in this room, all over this room. Every single person in this room could be used to pray for someone and have an ailment or an illness leave them. Any of you. And it doesn't matter if 20 minutes before you were driving into church and you gave somebody the bird. God could still do it if you made yourself available. He might snap your finger real quick and say, look, temperamental Christians. But the truth is, God's been working so hard on my faith. And when I say my faith, when you go into a position of doubting that what you pray is being heard, you know, when you think to yourself, God, I prayed so hard for my dad that you would heal him. And but what did I pray in tongues? That must have been a whole different story. I really have the belief that at the points that God was calling me, my dad was already having encounters with the Spirit, because I was, and it was a total and complete connection. But I was at that point just a week or so ago of saying, well, are you even hearing the words that come out of my mouth sometimes, God? And you know what? He said, are you praying the words that I'm telling you to pray, Jeff? Are you actually seeking my will, or are you just dictating your will? My will is for my dad to live, outlive me. So I don't ever everybody outlive me. So I don't ever have to deal with grief again. I'd rather go first. I told my mom that the other day, and she's, no, you're not. You won't. But that was really what I felt at the time, is like, I don't ever want to feel like this again. And God didn't listen to me asking that I wouldn't have to feel this. How are you going to grow up if you don't feel some pain and hurt? Your Christian walk is not going to be paved with, cotton candy. That's not the promise. I had to get hurt so that I could stretch myself out to him a little more. So I could have enough doubt in him to say, okay, God, okay, come on, tell me what happened. Tell me why this went like this. Why did this happen? And I really, honestly, and I'm going to tell you another thing that a lot of us feel in this room when we go through things like human beings, because that's what we are. But sometimes as Christians, I think we should somehow handle things more superiorly than the rest of the world. And to an extent, we have things that the world doesn't have. We have the peace that passes all understanding. But when I was feeling that way, and when I was actually kind of just being like, are you hearing me? And doubting whether God ever moved on my prayers, which I know he does. It's that moment where you just kind of get that weird feeling in your heart. It was like, I'm ashamed of myself for feeling like this. I'm ashamed of myself for letting this grief actually shake me some. I was ashamed of myself for having this, I don't know, feeling of, well, maybe I just should stop praying. Maybe sometimes I should stop talking, but I shouldn't stop praying. And so that feeling of shame kind of started sneaking in on me. And I think there's people in this room that you've been prayed for, or you think that you somehow you think that, you know what, the thing that's wrong with me, yeah, I got it because I sinned. I inherited it from my parents. It's a generational curse. They exist. And so I'm ashamed. And that shame keeps you from even confessing or thinking about what's really at the root of whatever the problem is. It keeps you from joy, regardless of the problem, because shame is the enemy's tactic. What does shame usually stop us from doing? It stops us from worshiping, stops us from wanting to pray for other people, because if you're ashamed of you and if you've got this problem, I couldn't possibly lay hands on someone else when I'm still in my condition and have God work through me. That's shame. And I had that feeling. I was ashamed of myself for being just so negative towards God. And somewhere deep inside of me, and I have a great wife. She set up like 3 Bible plans that are all about dealing with grief. Um, and we went through them one right after the next so that I could understand. And one of them actually said, you're going to, at one point or another, doubt your relationship with God. Not that he exists, just that your relationship with him was as strong as you thought it was, because now you feel shaken. And so everyone in here's probably felt shaken. Everyone in here has probably got one thing on their mind, that it's like, if God would just do this, if God would heal this, if this would happen, my life would be so much better. My witness and my testimony would be so much bigger. And then when it doesn't happen again, because we have a weekend like this and it's a really good weekend, but then 3, 4, 5 days later, it's like, well, it's starting to fade. Or I thought it was healed, but I wasn't. That's the enemy just coming and telling you, look, everything that's been built inside of you is nothing. Well, it's not. The spiritual traction that God gains inside of your life every single day, if you allow it, let him, and volunteer yourself for it, far surpasses any physical healing. But physical healing is more than available. It's something that we should always be seeking for ourselves and others. We don't have this sometimes I think we come in with the entitlement attitude, like, I'm a Christian, this should just be happening. It's not whether or not it should be happening. It's whether or not you're moving in the right steps. It's whether or not you're actually praying for what needs to happen. It's whether or not your relationship is growing with him. He's got all sorts of plans for you. And our my favorite apostle, Paul, he wanted one of those plans to be healing, and he never got it. Traveled with a doctor. With a doctor. So it's like God's saying to all of us, I'm going to move in this church. You're not entitled to it. You can't earn it. Even fasting is not going to be what gets it for you. When it's time, it's going to happen. Your relationship with me, it is completely and totally planned, and I am ready to move. He's ready to come in this building and just rock us like he did this morning, so you can take it home, so you can have it with you when you go to work, because you can rock people's lives. You're an image bearer. And if you have to limp in or you run in, Zach told me, he said, if you really want to do rock them today, just run up and down the aisles. I was like, only if you chase me. My running days are done. But the fact is, we have to offer him everything about us. Our fear, our shame, our anxiety, all of those things have to be given to him, because he's going to work, and he's going to work through you, and he's going to work on you. And those things, there's no doubt in my mind with those things. Every single one of us in this room, he's working through you and he's working on you. Oh, wow, it's 12:40. Why didn't you guys stop me? Just stand up with me really quick. I had a lot more things to say today, but I was hoping I wouldn't feel too emotional during worship. Those guys ruined that. I feel like what we need to be always looking forward to is what's God doing right now? See, I have a past with him that includes a great move in my life. And then the times that I tried to duplicate that, go back, try it again, that wasn't where he was working on me anymore. He had already done that. He had already worked on that part of me. And I couldn't just like coax him into, no, this is what I'm used to and this is what I'm comfortable with. Every single person in this room, you've got your comfort spot with God. You've got your comfort spot with your spouse or your friends or your neighbor. It's comfortable. Growth is never comfortable. It might come through grief, might come through physical pain and physical problems, might come through a financial battle. But we here in this room respond to that stuff differently than the world responds to it. See, a financial battle, grief, pain, those are things God can use. He can't use sitting on the couch watching another TV show. He can't use you saying, no, this is what I religiously do every time, and this is how I want you to move, God. This is how you do it for me. He wants you out of your comfort zone. He wants you to think bigger than you've ever thought before. He wants you to move in ways that you've never moved before, but you've got to be able to be embarrassed, nervous. You've got to be able to get up in front of people without one bit of a plan and just start talking. At least that's what he did to me. Anything could happen at that point if you want to. But if you want to say, I want to be comfortable, I want to do the things I've always done, I don't want to come up front and pray for somebody, I don't want to share my testimony, those things aren't comfortable to me, then you're going to sit right there in the same place with him. When you come into a season that we're going into, he's stretching you. He's stretching me. He's stretching him. He's stretching everybody in this room to move outside of a comfort zone that we have, to actually see the problems going on in our lives as a benefit to us because we know they're going to grow us. We know that God's trying to work on us, and we should count it as glory to him to go through something. I don't know if you have anything, bro. Just bow your heads. Father, right now, as we all approach you in different ways, as we all reach out to you from different places and different positions in our hearts, we just ask that you show us how you want to stretch us and that we begin to pray the prayers that you want us to pray. We say the words that you would put in our mouths. We move toward the people that you would direct us towards. Don't let us be like we were yesterday, no matter how good yesterday may have been. Don't let us continue moving in the same direction if it's a direction that you've decided you've closed that road. We just ask right now that as your anointing pour out over every single person here, that it touches the thing that you are trying to heal. No matter what we've begged for, we want what you want for us more. We just need our eyes open to it sometimes. We thank you. We bless your name. Amen.